And tomorrow night on ITV, looking back at the now infamous game, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? A very major scandal is at 8. Next, it's the news at 10.
Potato.
Support bubbles will remain.
Number 63, you'll never beat me.
Coming up, new lockdowns for England and Scotland, with people told to stay at home and schools closed, plus the rollout of the Oxford vaccine.
Good citizens, I'm here to help you retrieve your stolen laptops.
I'm afraid Direct Line already replaced them. See?
I have to go. Somewhere a crime is being committed.
Tom's been stealing out the fridge again.
I haven't.
Your move, Tom.
We've made some changes at home recently.
No more single-use water bottles.
Police can find.
And you know what? Bitter tastes good.
And it feels good too.
As the boat raced under the final bridge, the young cocks thought, warm, creamy, tasty, Heinz tomato soup. Yum. With no artificial colours or preservatives, Heinz tomato soup makes it better.
Here's a great welcome to BritBox. Get 50% off your first 3 months for a limited time only. Then stream and download undiscovered gems, loads of exclusives, and BritBox original series. Welcome aboard, including Spitting In. Love in it. Thanks very much. TV from the BBC, ITV, Channel 4 and Channel 5. All in one place and ad-free. Join BritBox today and save 50% for 3 months. Search BritBox sale.
Savings on every range. The winter sale at Oak Furnitureland ends this Sunday.
Now, with the main stories making the headlines this Monday night, it's the ITV News at 10.
At 10.
It is another full national lockdown. A short time ago, the Prime Minister announced that schools, colleges, non-essential shops and gyms must close, as we are all confined to home unless we have to leave for work or medical care.
I know how frustrated that you are, and I know that you had more than enough of government guidance about defeating this virus. But now, more than ever, we must pull together.
Mr Johnson's statement followed a similar announcement from Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland.
Stay-at-home message and advice is now so important that from tomorrow it will become law, just as it was in the lockdown last year.
Wales and Northern Ireland, of course, are already under lockdowns. Exams this summer are scrapped too. The Prime Minister did, though, suggest he might be able to start lifting restrictions from mid-February. Also on News at 10. Emily has a special report from the intensive care front line as anxious and exhausted staff fear the worst is yet to come.
Of course I'm worried. I'm worried for everybody. I'm worried for the general public and I'm worried for my team. And myself.
The rollout of the Oxford jab begins, and the Prime Minister says more than 13 million of the most at-risk will be vaccinated in the next 6 weeks.
We will have removed huge numbers of people from the path of the virus. And of course, that will eventually enable us to lift many of the restrictions we have endured for so long.
I just want to find 11,780 votes.
And will Trump now be investigated for conspiring to defraud voters?
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. A day which started with a moment to celebrate the long-awaited rollout of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine has tonight ended with a return to nationwide restrictions of the kind not seen since the first lockdown in March. Until the middle of next month at least, people in England will only be able to leave their homes for limited reasons. Schools and colleges will close and move to online learning, with most of this summer's exams scrapped. There was, though, some light amidst the darkness. By mid-February, the NHS hopes to have vaccinated everyone in the top 4 priority groups, including care home residents and the over 70s, 13 million in just 6 weeks' time. Before then lie what the Prime Minister called the hardest weeks of the pandemic, with hospitals under more pressure than ever. To help ease that crisis, Mr. Johnson made a simple but familiar request. Please stay at home.
It may be a new year, but tonight, from Downing Street, came an all-too-familiar message. A virus again out of control, a country again locking down to stop it.
As I speak to you tonight, our hospitals are under more pressure from COVID than at any time since the start of the pandemic. In England alone, the number of COVID patients in hospitals has increased by nearly a third in the last week to almost 27,000. And that number is 40% higher than the first peak in April. It's clear that we need to do more together to bring this new variant under control while our vaccines are rolled out. In England, we must therefore go into a national lockdown which is tough enough to contain this variant. That means the government is once again instructing you to stay at home.
It means a return to many of the rules from the lockdown last March. England's schools will close immediately, except for vulnerable children and the pupils of key workers, and this summer's GCSE and A-level exams will be cancelled.
Parents whose children were in school today may reasonably ask why we did not take this decision sooner. And the answer is simply that we have been doing everything in our power to keep schools open, because we know how important each day in education is to children's life chances.
Today was meant to be about this, the rollout of the first Oxford AstraZeneca vaccines. His celebrations cut short this morning, but tonight the Prime Minister said he hoped in 6 weeks' time many of the most vulnerable will have received their first dose, and with them the first signs of hope.
If the rollout of the vaccine programme continues to be successful, if deaths start to fall as the vaccine takes effect, and critically, if everyone plays their part by following the rules, then I hope we can steadily move out of lockdown, reopening schools after the February half-term and starting cautiously to move regions down the tiers.
MPs will return to Parliament on Wednesday to pass tonight's announcements into law, the Labour leader tonight offering his unequivocal support.
These measures are necessary, and it's really important that we all support them. These are going to be really, really tough weeks now, and I think all of us need to pull together to try to get through this. We're asking a lot of the British public. In return, we have to deliver the vaccine.
But until more people get that vaccine, it's back into lockdown we go. 9 months after he announced the first one, the Prime Minister ended his latest address to a nation he accepts is fed up.
The weeks ahead will be the hardest yet, but I really do believe that we're entering the last phase of the struggle, because with every jab that goes into our arms, we are tilting the odds against COVID and in favour of the British people.
In Liverpool tonight, the streets are already all but deserted. A city that began the day in Tier 3 will tomorrow, like the rest of the country, wake up yet again in a national lockdown, in which it will remain for at least 6 weeks. Daniel Hewitt, News at 10.
Okay, well, let's take a look at some of the new measures announced earlier, and please remember these apply specifically to England and will remain in place until at least mid-February. Like in March, you should stay at home unless it is impossible to work from home, or if you need to shop for essentials, or to exercise with your own household or with one other person, but no other socialising is allowed. Providing care or help to a vulnerable person remains acceptable. You're also allowed to go out if you're attending a medical appointment or if you're fleeing harm. From tomorrow, all schools and colleges will be closed except for children of key workers and vulnerable children. Nurseries and special schools will remain open, and childcare support bubbles continue as they are, but universities will remain closed for most courses. All non-essential retail, hospitality and beauty salons must close. Restaurants will be delivery and takeaway only. No alcohol can be sold. Places of worship will remain open, as will playgrounds, but golf and tennis clubs and outdoor gyms will close. Team sports will be banned, though elite sports can continue. Finally, on international travel, only essential journeys will be allowed. The biggest change announced by Boris Johnson was that decision to shut schools and colleges while most students must stay away from university. Only this morning he said closing primary schools was one of his greatest misgivings about the first lockdown. But with pupils likely to spread the virus, he made what many believe was an inevitable decision. This summer's exams haven't been formally cancelled yet, but with so-called alternative arrangements being made, the Prime Minister effectively announced tonight they will be scrapped.
We recognise that this will mean it's not possible or fair for all exams to go ahead this summer as normal.
If Cameron and Liam were looking for reassurance tonight, well, instead, the Prime Minister's given them twin concerns. No school and no exams. So how do they get the GCSE grades they need?
I do want to do my GCSEs. And, if we don't do our GCSEs, I don't feel like I'm going to achieve what I want to do.
I just don't understand it, not going to lie, because it's kind of he's saying that we're going to do our GCSEs, but how are we going to do our GCSEs? He's saying that he's going to support us, but how is he going to support us? I don't really understand.
I just want to check that you've received our message. We're doing online lessons at school tomorrow.
This is the call that will now go out across the country. At Anderton Park Primary in Birmingham, they'd already begun making it.
We've been here since very early this morning at 7 o'clock, all of us, trying to work out the best way forward.
Now the government's deciding for them, closing all schools to most pupils, as the head here had been planning.
We hear phrases like, this is spreading like wildfire from doctors. It's out of control from Matt Hancock. Those phrases do not make me think, yeah, it's absolutely fine to open as we were in December. Because it's not the same. Things have changed, and things have changed very rapidly over even the last few days.
And now the government's policy has too. All primary and secondary schools will stay closed from tomorrow until mid-February. As during the first lockdown, the children of key workers will still be allowed into classrooms, as well as vulnerable children, which includes those in care and with special educational needs. But all other pupils will have to learn from home.
What the government now needs to do is what it didn't do in the summer. It needs to prepare for remote learning. It needs to make sure that children are being fed at home, they're being safeguarded. It needs to help with their mental health.
Those are concerns for parents too, with just a few hours' notice. At drop-off, schools were staying open. At pick-up, they were due to close.
The safety, I understand the safety, but what about the children that they're missing out on all education?
I definitely don't feel like you can give what a school can give by being at home. Definitely not. I think I'm okay with them being at home, to be honest. At least they're safe at home.
The government must now find a way to balance those risks. Can empty classrooms really provide a full education? Paul Brand, News at 10, Birmingham.
Several hours before Boris Johnson announced that new lockdown for England, Nicola Sturgeon was doing the same in Scotland. She said hospitals face being overrun without tougher action. So, from tomorrow, people on the mainland and Skye will be ordered to stay at home, with schools and nurseries closed too. The measures will be in place throughout January, but the First Minister wouldn't rule out keeping them in place even longer, if necessary.
Today was the last chance for Scots to have one final flourish, making the most of a cold snap during a Tier 4 lockdown. But the chance to gather like this outdoors in groups of 6 to enjoy the few freedoms remaining has now been brought to a very sudden stop. Modelling shows Scottish hospitals will be overwhelmed by coronavirus within a month, and so the nation's First Minister is responding with another full lockdown.
We consider that this stay-at-home message and advice is now so important that from tomorrow it will become law, just as it was in the lockdown last year. This means it will only be permissible to leave home for an essential purpose. This will include, for example, caring responsibilities, essential shopping, exercise and being part of an extended household.
From midnight tonight, it's only permitted to meet one person from one other household outdoors. Scotland's schools were supposed to reopen on the 18th of January, but they'll now stay closed until at least the 1st of February. And those shielding have to work from home if they can, and if they can't, they're told not to go into work. But there is growing frustration that Scotland has become stuck in a cycle of lockdowns with no definitive end in sight.
It's a case of how long will this last for, you know? And it's people who have already been caged in already and who are obeying the rules, fair play to them. But it's how long will this go? I mean, if you look at Boris Johnson's government and Nicola Sturgeon's government, are they doing the best job? I don't think they are.
Patience is wearing thin, but the data shows current restrictions are not working in Scotland.
I'm a doctor, so I think seeing what I see at work, I think I've got quite scared over the last few weeks, certainly, so I think something had to change.
Today was the last dance. Scotland now goes into hibernation, and the pace of the vaccine programme means it could be spring before it's safe to open up once again. Peter Smith, News at 10, Glasgow.
The reason for the new lockdowns is, of course, the rapid spread of the new variant of coronavirus. Here you can see just how much the virus is surging. In April, there were less than 100 confirmed cases per million people. By last Saturday, that was up to 700. The UK's COVID alert level has been raised to 5, the highest for the first time, meaning there is a material risk of healthcare services being overwhelmed. It follows a staggering rise in coronavirus patients in England's hospitals. There are now more than 4,000 in the Midlands. That's up 27% on 2 weeks ago. The South East has 4,500 people in hospital, a 76% rise, and London has more than 6,000 patients, up 48% in just 2 weeks. Today, one London hospital allowed us inside to see just how bad things have got.
They've seen it all here, and that perhaps adds to the anxiety. Intensive care staff at Northwick Park Hospital in North London are back in the COVID epicentre. With 29 critically ill patients to look after, they're edging closer to the hell they were in last March.
Some of them haven't yet needed ventilation. We're hoping to avoid that. Some are improving, and unfortunately some of them are very young.
It's not just the patients the matron is concerned about, but staffing too. In this bay, there was just one intensive care nurse. The others had been drafted in from different areas of the hospital.
So the biggest challenge is our staff. There's only a finite number of critical care nurses available to us. Yes, it is bad. What's good about this?
You're worried now?
Yeah, of course I'm worried. I'm worried for everybody. I'm worried for the general public, and I'm worried for my team and myself.
You wouldn't know it, though. There's no lack of care or compassion here. Mr. Mohammed reaches out to thank the nurse by his side. He's been here for 5 days, and it's been hard going.
How are you? You're okay? I'm really bad.
He wanted to talk further, but his oxygen mask made it too difficult. Others were simply too sick to try. Staff have dealt with this number of patients before, but they're now increasing and at an all too familiar rate.
This is now coming at us with a speed and ferocity we haven't seen since March and April.
So very large numbers coming into the hospital, over 400 patients on the wards within our trust, within the two acute hospitals. But we are worried. I mean, 2 weeks' time, these numbers are showing no signs of falling at the moment. So I think it's going to come under increasing strain, and we'll be finding more and more ways to cope. So we have plans, but we're having to activate plans we haven't had to use since right in the early days of spring.
Time for a lockdown?
Yes.
There are so many patients here in intensive care now. They are having to expand and create more bed capacity, and this whole area will become a red zone. They haven't done that since April, a real sign, I think, that things are now getting critical.
By tomorrow, this ICU will have double the number of beds for COVID patients. They hope they won't run out, but plans are in place if indeed they do.
I think we're prepared for the next 2 weeks. I don't feel as though we're not in control of things. I think if anything we are, and I think we've got a better way of managing it. And I think the main thing for me is that we are now communicating with other organisations so we can share the workload. So if we do come under pressure, we have got colleagues who can help support us.
By that you mean other hospitals can take your patients?
Yes.
No one here wants to transfer patients to other hospitals, but in London alone, their numbers have increased by nearly 70% in just 10 days. With cases so high, there is no doubt that will go up, and staff may not have a choice. Emily Morgan, News at 10 at Northwick Park in London.
Well, just how long nationwide restrictions last is likely to hang on the speed with which vaccines can be delivered to the most vulnerable across the UK. There was a major moment in that effort today with the first dose of the Oxford AstraZeneca jab being given to 82-year-old Brian Pinker. And tonight, Boris Johnson said the NHS expects to have been able to offer the vaccine to everyone in the 4 top priority groups by the middle of next month. If they can do it, and there are still plenty of questions over just how, it would be, of course, a huge step back towards normality.
The very first vial, number 0001, and the very first patient. Finally, the wait for the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is over.
The vaccine means everything to me. I mean, to my mind, it's the only way of getting back to a bit of normal life.
A big moment too for healthcare workers like Sam Foster, who gave him the jab.
Many people have been shielding since March. It's their real first hope that they're going to get back to some degree of normality, so it's really a privilege. Doing this at scale, which is really more than ever what the NHS wants to do now, is really important.
But can the NHS scale fast enough for the vaccine to take on the new strain of COVID-19?
Well, I'd like to see 2 million vaccines a week. We've been preparing in the NHS for many months for this vaccination programme, and if the manufacturers get 2 million doses a week to us, then our aim is to get those 2 million doses immediately into people's arms.
But whatever you do, don't interpret that as a target to vaccinate 2 million a week. Clearly a point of frustration for the Health Secretary.
You've got this target of 2 million doses a week. What's the issue? Why we
No, I don't. Right, so you've just got the whole story on the wrong way around.
So is your target...
Just ask whatever you want. I'll say what I'm going to say. The NHS will inject this vaccine as quickly as it can be supplied by the manufacturers, who are doing a brilliant job, and that way we can all get through this together.
There are around 25 million people on the government's priority list for vaccination. So far, around 1 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine have been administered. This week, there'll be 500,000 doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine available, with tens of millions coming in the next few weeks. If the NHS were to vaccinate 2 million people a week, it could mean that entire vulnerable group would have some form of protection by the end of March. Because this group make up 99% of preventable COVID deaths, that could change everything. But not one link in the vaccine logistics chain can fail.
Supply is always a challenge, and my experience is you never have more vaccine than you asked for. You rarely get what you did ask for, and most often you get less than you asked for. And holding that in mind, we need to get as much as we can, as fast as we can, and then we save lives.
Each individual getting a vaccine can expect to be protected from the worst of COVID-19. But who knows how long it will be before all of us see the benefits, given the scale of the task ahead.
Okay, well, it's a big day today, so I'm joined, of course, by Tom and Robert to discuss the science and the politics of this. Tom, can I come to you first? Look, let's be honest, the government's whole strategy is based around the vaccine. We had the rather chilling suggestion over the last 24 hours or so that it might not work on some of these new variants like the South African one. How worried should we be?
It will remain a worry until we've got the evidence we need to show one way or the other whether these variants are going to be resistant to the vaccine or not. Right now, it's important to say we do not have that evidence. It's all theoretical. There was some interesting theoretical work that came out over the weekend that has made people more concerned about that South African variant, but really, until it's challenged with this vaccine or until we do some more experiments on it, we just don't know. Given we've got so much else to worry about at the moment, I think everyone's just proceeding, assuming the vaccines will work, even if they're slightly limited. A 95% effective vaccine that's slightly reduced its effectiveness is still going to do a big job against this pandemic.
Okay. Some people are saying, can't they do more than 2 million a week? Some people are saying, are they really going to do 2 million a week? What's your own assessment of the rollout plan?
Speaking to people with a lot of experience of vaccine rollouts for the annual flu vaccination campaign today, you saw David Salisbury, our PC, used to run this for the NHS. He says 2 million a week. Actually, that's not an unachievable number. That is something that the primary care has the capacity to do. What concerns him the most is supply, is the vaccine supply. The government seems confident. AstraZeneca, if the Oxford example, say they can do 2 million a week. So that's the ballpark number they're aiming for. But really, it will come down to will we actually have those doses to roll out, is my understanding.
Okay, Robert, what's your general reaction? This is a massive moment. I mean, we're back again to last March, full lockdown.
Yeah, look, let's really capture the magnitude of this. The latest lockdown, there's been some uncertainty about this, but just to be clear, is not going to end until the 22nd of February, and then if things go to plan, we will be back in tears. In other words, we will have been subject to restrictions on our way of life for a whole year. And there are some parts of the country, the northwest, Leicester, which have been more or less locked down for the best, almost totally locked down for the best part of a year. Children have seen a year of education written off, the burden in terms of mental health extraordinary. We're going to come on and talk about the economy in a minute or two. Now, lots of people blame the Prime Minister for not locking down early enough in March, not locking down in September when he was supposed to, promising us Christmas, which may have led people to misbehave, which may be one of the reasons why the vaccine is surging now. But I think there are also questions about us. One of the reasons he did all these things late, some would say, is because we as a society don't want our freedoms taken away. In Asia, where they were happy to have their freedoms taken away, they are back to normal life. And I think we have to think about how we organise our society.
Okay, well, you mentioned the cost. I mean, hundreds of billions of pounds spent on propping up the economy last year. What's your assessment of how much longer we can really afford this?
Well, I mean, there's two questions. One is how long we can afford it, in a sense, psychologically, as it were. But you're right, the financial cost is extraordinary. Okay, I mean, even before this latest lockdown, we were looking at £300 billion of public spending on COVID-related measures, and debt this year of £400 billion. That's now going to go up very significantly. The debt this year is going to rise by something like £450 billion. Now, you know, all the orthodox economic groups have completely changed their tune on debt. You know, 10 years ago they were saying this kind of borrowing would lead to national bankruptcies. Now they're saying, well, interest rates are low, it's all completely affordable. But although the economics of the household are completely different from the economics of the nation, you can't just go on borrowing and borrowing and borrowing forever. And you are right, we are at a point where, you know, so many choices are going to have to be made. How we want to spend our money, you know, and the other thing which is really important about all of this is we have to make a choice about how we distribute the resources we've got, because the burden has fallen hardest on the frail, the young, those who have least.
Okay, Robert, thank you very much indeed. Now, some other news, and a judge has ruled that WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange should not be extradited to the US. The judge said there was a real risk Mr. Assange would be able to take his own life if he was moved to an American prison. The US government has said it will appeal the decision. Mr. Assange is facing charges there, of course, over the publication of leaked military and diplomatic documents. Now, still on the US, President Trump's extraordinary leaked phone call to a Georgian election official, pressurizing him to find thousands of votes, is being seen by some as an assault on democracy. On Wednesday, Congress will confirm Joe Biden's election victory, usually a ceremonial moment. Dozens of Republicans say they will vote against it, and they will be cheered on by thousands of Mr. Trump's supporters on the streets outside.
This week is Donald Trump's final stand. As he returned to the White House from Florida, he is still furiously disputing the election outcome and demanding that the new Congress, when it meets here on Wednesday, refuses to certify Joe Biden's victory. It follows a startling phone call the president made to election officials in the state of Georgia this weekend. He insisted they should find him extra votes. The conversation was promptly leaked.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state. The people of Georgia are angry. The people of the country are angry. And there's nothing wrong with saying that, that you've recalculated.
Well, Mr. President, the challenge that you have is the data you have is wrong.
Democrats say it's an outrage, potentially criminal extortion, and the vice president-elect put it this way.
Well, it was, yes, certainly the voice of desperation. Most certainly that. And it was a bald-faced, bold abuse of power by the President of the United States.
Election officials in Georgia tonight pushed back at the president, armed with charts and visibly exasperated as they sought to debunk Trump's conspiracy theories.
This is all easily, provably false. Yet the president persists. And by doing so, undermines Georgians' faith in the election system.
Thank you very much. For some, it's reminiscent of the infamous phone call of 2019 that led to Trump's impeachment, when the president appeared to be demanding political dirt on Joe Biden from the Ukrainians. Donald Trump has one more card to play. This video is part of an effort to galvanize his supporters to take to the streets on Wednesday. The president hoping that a huge turnout can somehow delay certification of the election result. Those protest marches will not stop certification, but they could bring chaos. And that has prompted former US defense secretaries to warn the military to stay out of politics between now and Inauguration Day. Robert Moore, News at 10, Washington.
Finally, tonight, we return to the issue that has dominated our lives for 10 months now and seems set to do so for some time yet. Today was, for many people, the first day back at work after the Christmas break, but normally bustling towns and city centres remained largely deserted tonight. There is a saying that the darkest hour comes just before the dawn, a sentiment that may feel relevant to many. For while people in all 4 nations face life under a full lockdown once again, this time it is different. There is hope on the horizon. Vaccines have arrived and are beginning to get to those most in need. And the faster that can happen, the sooner, of course, this may all finally be over. Happy New Year. Please let it be better than the last one. Good night. See you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.
What?
2021, vaccines being rolled out, and I think a lot of people, come New Year's Day, just thought, I'm not sure, how much more of this we're going to have to face.
Our job is to keep you going.
So if you are feeling a bit low, we're here throughout the morning.
You're not alone.
ITV's most talked about show,
Good Morning Britain,
weekdays from 6.
6.
Once the early mist clears, today will be mostly warm in many parts of the country, especially the kitchen. Heinz Soup Pots sponsor ITV National Weather.
Hello and a very good evening to you. So little change in the weather story as we go through the next few days. We're holding on to those cold temperatures across the UK. Still further showers at times, which could be wintry. And of course, there will be some frost around, some icy stretches, and even the risk of some freezing fog too. Now, for the rest of tonight, we've still got this rainfall lingering across the southeast and the Channel Islands. It could be heavy in places. Elsewhere, 1 or 2 showers blowing in on that brisk northeasterly airflow, which could be wintry. Although for most of us, overnight dry with clear skies, so of course cold out there. There will be a frost around and some icy stretches Glaciers too. So tomorrow morning is going to go through a cold, frosty start today. First thing, there will be some ice around. And again, we've got this rain lingering across parts of East Anglia, the southeast and the Channel Islands. Elsewhere, where it's a mixture of sunshine and showers. Those showers could be wintry in places. In between, though, a good deal of dry weather, but staying cold wherever you are. Highs just up to around 6 degrees.
Heinz Soup Pots sponsor ITV National Weather.
Good evening, I'm Duncan Golestani. As the